Some perspective is that our oldest son is a cancer survivor. So he had cancer at a very young age. He's healthy and he's actually in med school now. I hear it from a lot of people who say I went quiet, but the reality is a lot of things I was doing for all those years, they weren't working as well anymore. Advertisers often, especially these days, restrict the algorithm to their detriment, to the point they're getting worse results.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to a remote episode this week, but we're only joined by the legend that is Jon Loomer. Hey, Jon.
Yeah, how you doing, John? Thanks for having me.
Honestly, this is such a pleasure because, first, I think people float the term OG around quite a bit, but I would describe you as the genuine OG of Facebook ads. So this is like an absolute honor. And when I got started in Facebook ads, I learned so much from your content and all that foundational knowledge. So much of that came from your blog, your content, the power hitters, all that stuff that you do. So thank you so much for that. I appreciate
that. It means I'm old, maybe been around for a while. There's the O of OG, but it's also something I'm proud of that I've survived this long. So yeah, it's pretty cool.
So we're probably not going to talk that much, weirdly, about Facebook ads in this episode. We're going to talk about your background, how you kind of came to be the Facebook ads Jon Loomer. So to start with, should we kick off with, in your own words, what's your background? Who are you? What do you do?
I mean, it's a longer story every day, right? But so in terms of, the business side, look, I'm a philosophy major, had no idea what I want to do. Originally, I wanted to be a sports writer.
Okay.
But, that took a bunch of turns. First of all, philosophy major. Thought I wanted to be maybe a teacher, follow my parents for like 6 months or so. I took some classes after I graduated to be a teacher. That didn't happen. I got married at a young age, 24. Moved to Colorado and kind of took the first job I could find right away. So I was in insurance for 5 years. And
okay,
I think there's nothing better than having a job that you hate to give you perspective, really, on what you want and don't want. I mean, you also don't want to get stuck in it forever.
No.
But luckily, what it also did, so we're talking 99, that'll age me a little bit. I was obsessed with fantasy sports. And which also made me probably a terrible employee doing something that I didn't enjoy doing, right? So I was spending a lot of time looking at my fantasy teams and stuff like that. But I also started writing for fantasy sports websites, started my own. When starting your own website was a big deal. I mean, we're talking like 2002, 2003, something like that. And that actually led to me getting a job at the NBA overseeing fantasy games. And
what a job.
It was an insane job to be able to just sit down with the development team and say, hey, this game sounds kind of cool. What if we did this and that? And then they go out and build it. And okay. And you just kind of take it for granted that it happened. But overseeing that and content and just everything. And I didn't even realize what I was doing was marketing because I had no background in marketing. But that's essentially what it was. So I did that for 3 seasons. And the key point of this for what I'm doing now is that the NBA partnered with Facebook when there were 50 million people on the platform. And that was my first exposure to Facebook. And I fell in love with the platform. And so it was very early days. I mean, we're talking 2007, very early days of marketing on Facebook. So I wouldn't really say that's what I was doing. I was probably the first admin of the NBA Facebook group, the official NBA Facebook group before there were pages. That's where we're at. But it was an amazing job, but we had to move to New Jersey to do it. End up having, the odds and ends jobs after that, got laid off twice in the span of 2.5 years. And then started my website the plan wasn't, I'm going to start my own business. Because honestly, I'd have no clue how to start a business. That was not really even an idea. It was simply, I'm going to use some of the stuff that I know and highlight some of my skills that I've learned during the past, several years to get a job. Along the way, though, I was kind of spoiled in the jobs I'd have, because not only at the NBA, I mean, I did some pretty cool stuff after that. It was just tough time. I mean, you're talking 2008 to 2011. There's a lot
So
of
when it was all,
economy issues. So I got laid off at a startup development company, got laid off American Cancer Society, but I was VP of Strategic Marketing, which again, that title sounded crazy to me. Didn't even realize I was marketing until I applied for that job. And then I was spoiled. Also didn't want to move again. We had, I had a family of 3 young boys, and I've been asking my wife to move us across country to do that MBA thing. And everything else after that had been remote. And I was like, we couldn't do this again. So number one, I was spoiled, wanted a job I actually enjoyed now. Number two, I didn't want to move across country again. So the result of that was I just didn't get a job, right? I would apply for stuff. Wasn't really into it. And just start writing. So this website, again, was kind of like this resume, breathing resume is what I was hoping it would be. And just kind of writing about social media, marketing stuff, and kind of the job search and whatnot. And then eventually I began using social media to build my brand once I started getting traffic to the website. And then that provided me more of a focus on Facebook marketing. And then I started using ads to promote my brand. And then I would start writing about Facebook ads. And then that ended up becoming my thing. But it was kind of this process, and it wasn't this well thought out goal that this is what I'm going to do. And then, so for the last 12 years, been primarily focused on what is now advanced meta advertising, education. And that's what I do.
My observation is that you go really well. And there's sometime around the pandemic, kind of went quite quiet. And then you came back with your pubcast, and you started doing the videos on Instagram. What happened in that quiet phase? Like, what was that?
So some of it was by design, okay? So the entire business, the point of it too, was to spend more time with my kids, at my boys as they were growing up. Some other background there, some perspective is that our oldest son is a cancer survivor. So he had cancer at a very young age. He's healthy, and he's actually in med school now.
That must have been.
But so that kind of changes your outlook on everything. So that was my primary focus. I wanted to create the freedom to spend more time with them, and ultimately to be their baseball coach is what happened, and as they got older, that commitment became big, tougher and tougher, just all consuming. I started a team for them, and kind of used my marketing knowledge to build a brand around a team, and actually still get phone calls to this day from people thinking I'm still running this team and whatnot. Because first of all, that commitment was a lot. Second of all, there does come a point of a kind of burnout eventually as well, with everything that was going on. It was the perfect storm because then the pandemic hits. And so I had all these plans for 2020. And I just remember we were preparing to go on a baseball trip, of course. Everything was baseball. And we weren't sure if it was going to happen. So this was March of 2020. And I, for whatever reason, sent an email to my list, talking about that, and also just kind of asking people how they're doing, because this was like just in the very early stages of the pandemic. I just want to see what's going on. And I just got flooded with responses of people who were suffering, sick, lost their jobs, on lockdown because they're in Italy, in Europe, and it hadn't truly hit in the U.S. yet. It's, telling me to take it seriously, this and that. And then I'm like, okay, and I'm supposed to sell with everything that's going on. I already don't really like selling. So I scrapped everything that I was planning for that year, and really just lost. I mean, at the same time, trying to run a baseball team through the pandemic and manage parents and their expectations, and they think, why aren't we playing? We should play. We should travel. We should do it. It was awful, honestly. So whether it's the anxiety of all those things or whatever, I mean, I hear it from a lot of people who say I went quiet, but the reality is like, a lot of things I was doing for all those years, they weren't working as well anymore. Right.
Right.
So I was still blogging. I really would have to go back and look to see how frequently I still was, but I was still blogging. It just wasn't as impactful as it once was. Google was sending me 10,000 plus people every day at one point. And then it became a fraction of that. Facebook stopped working the way it used to, right? I mean, organic reach and all those things. I wasn't anywhere else really on social media. I didn't use Instagram other than as an ads placement. And I was like, I'm not going to get on TikTok or Snapchat or any of these other places. I was kind of stubborn in that way too. I didn't want to change. But I was in this weird place where it's like I was still kind of benefiting from those huge years to the point where it was still sustainable, but we were on this decline, and that decline was accelerated, I think, because of everything that happened during the pandemic and how I handled it. Yeah. And it's funny because the timing of when everything kind of came to a head. I mean, it was summer of 2022. I know I'm heading in a bad direction, coaching my, at the time, 14-year-old son's team, knowing this is also the last summer I was going to be coaching because he's moving on to high school and he's our youngest. So that was going to be the end of my coaching life. Wow. And I'd be able to then focus on business again. So, because really, trying to make a huge pivot in the business would have been challenging over those last few years because of everything else was going on. So now, as 100% dedicated to that, I had more mental space, and the decision was made. Okay, the one thing I'm not doing, short form video, and that's got to be the new focus.
We can't have a conversation without touching on where Meta ads are right now, and the last probably 2 years or so have seen enormous amounts of change, and I would argue the content from the likes of yourself more needed now than ever, given that people are just still, I think, trying to work out how to make the platform work best for them since, big changes like iOS, mm-hmm. right? And there's more change coming, right? So what's your take on where Meta ads is at right now? And do you have any concerns with where it's going? And how have you seen this play out in terms of your coaching?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's funny trying to determine where this all started, like the direction we're on right now, where it started. The easy answer is iOS 14, but I think it's before that. I think it was Cambridge Analytica, which technically is 2015, but I don't think it was really addressed until a few years later.
Yeah, and they started pulling out different targeting options.
Right. Didn't they? Started removing certain targeting options. It started to be more of a focus on privacy and how are advertisers using this data, which is often confused, like what advertisers actually see and whatnot. But it's really, what is the data that's being collected and how is it being used? And so then iOS 14 happened, where tracking became an option across apps and websites for iOS users, which would impact attribution, which impacts optimization, which impacts targeting as well. And I think that, though, was Meta's motivation for improving things like machine learning and modeling and all this stuff we're seeing now with optimization and broader targeting. Also knowing in the meantime, removing interests all the time due to concerns about discrimination oftentimes, right? And again, how that's being used for manipulative purposes. So it's like, okay, well, the solution is Meta, going broader and allowing the algorithm to find people. And it takes less of that focus off of the advertiser and their inputs and what they can be putting in there. I think that Meta's also seen over the years, and they remind us over and over and over, that advertisers often, especially these days, restrict the algorithm to their detriment, to the point they're getting worse results.
Yeah.
So
you can be your own worst enemy big time, can't you?
Exactly. And it's understandable because, and I was resistant to a lot of these changes too, because I'm someone who loved all the micro targeting stuff, and let's find this small group of people who are super active and going to lead to great results. And I often say, like, we were the algorithm back then. If we knew what we were doing, could get amazing results. Of course, it didn't necessarily scale, but it was so cheap. I think the difference became, over the years too, it just became more and more expensive because there are more advertisers, there's more demand. And so as a lot of us tried to hold on to some of those old strategies, but they just became less and less effective. So now we're at a point where, okay, and it started, I guess, a couple of years ago, where Meta started expanding our audiences, which was crazy to me at the time. And I'm sure a lot of advertisers, like, I set a target these people. Why would you target people beyond that, right? So it started out as an option for detailed targeting and lookalikes. And then there were cases where it became forced that you had no choice. And then we ran into things like Advantage Plus shopping campaigns, which stripped out all targeting inputs, and it relied entirely on your pixel data, conversion history, prior people who engaged with your ads. And it worked. And not for everybody, but for a lot of e-com businesses, it worked.
Yeah, we're seeing it work really well.
Yeah. And then they took that same type of approach for what is Advantage Plus Audience, where now our targeting inputs are only suggestions, and to then go much broader beyond that. And that is the priority now. That's prioritized. It's the default. You can switch back to the old targeting methods with where it could expand with advanced detailed targeting, things like that. But it's like 2 clicks away. They try to discourage you, like, are you sure that you really want to do this, right? So that's the direction we're heading, where our inputs mean a lot less. They're just targeting suggestions, and then you're kind of trusting the algorithm to do its thing. So there's definitely a lot of trust that you have to put in the algorithm for that. There is not a ton of transparency either. One of the things I've always asked for is, like, it would be really nice to know how many of the results came from the people I actually targeted and how many of the results came from Meta going beyond that group. We just don't know to know how effective it is. But I mean, I think we're still in this kind of middle ground where it's like, okay, this is the direction we're heading. There's still plenty of weaknesses in it. I write and record about it all the time. I mean, anything top of the funnel is probably going to be garbage, low quality results, just because of the way it works.
I think the big positive in all of this for me, anyway, I like the emphasis on creative that there is now. Mm-hmm. I think that's a really cool thing. But I do miss the probably like the somewhat nerdy approach of layering on really detailed audiences and then stacking everything up. And
Yeah. And that's the part. That's honestly the hard part for me transitioning to this direction, because I was not the kind of person who enjoyed creating the ad itself. All right, because I was more focused on all the levers. Like, I don't want to manipulate you with my copy and creative. I just want to make sure my ad is shown to the right people, because I know that my people like my approach of not being a hard sales manipulative person, right? So now if you're saying I've got to create the right copy and creative to attract the right people, now all of a sudden, yes, I am becoming more of a marketer, salesman. Those skills have to be prioritized.
it's a different job.
That's been an adjustment. Yeah.
It's a completely different job. It's the same with PPC, and it's a different skill set, which is good and bad, I think. But I personally do love that emphasis on creative. So, John, that was fascinating, and it was so good to kind of getting a little bit of a behind the scenes glimpse and a view on your story. Where can obviously people can go and find you online? Will you be out and about at all this year? I know social media marketing world's your event, right? And when was I there? 2018, maybe.
Well, so I spoke there.
Wicked,
I think 7 years in a row.
else.
I think it was 7 years in a row I spoke at Social Media Marketing World, 2014 to 20, if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, the last time was as the pandemic was rolling in.
Because they put one on, didn't they? Just before the world went mental.
And it was one of those where I was like, "Are you sure we're going to do this?" And again, we weren't quite certain how bad it was yet at that point. And then we did it. And I just remember, there's hand sanitizer everywhere and whatnot.
What great mad times. You don't do much else though, do
No.
you? That's the only event you choose to speak at. Right?
I mean, that was by design initially. I'm hoping to get out there for more events now. I've had I've had other opportunities. It's just trying to sort out the right ones. I've had actually a couple of them to go overseas, which sounds great. It's just
Come to London, John. Come to London.
Well, there's one that was going to be in Prague I think sounded great, and I was going to miss my son's birthday. I'm like,
nah.
And so I would love to go to London. It's just the timing has to be right too. I'm not coaching anymore, but that doesn't mean I don't have conflicts because of kids. Yeah.
Commitments. It's a big commitment, isn't it? And obviously, so where can people go find you? Obviously, jonloomer.com. Give us a list.
That's the best place, because now these days, not only do I have the blog posts there, but all my videos are posted there too, as special kind of post types where you have the video and a short blog post below it. But otherwise, you can find me anywhere on social. So it's TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, YouTube. All those places except for Facebook are at Jon Loomer. Jon Loomer is Jon Loomer Digital. But that's where you can find me now.
Excellent. Well, look, thank you so much, and I hope you have a great rest of your Friday. And thanks so much to everyone for listening in.
Oh, fantastic. Thanks so much, John.